What is happening, guys? Mathematician is back again. You know what we are, so let's get into it. So guys, I'm seeing a lot of videos coming out now and people obviously trying to rehash different things. I personally, I'm just going to put up the videos I feel to put up. And again, I'm going to take on board your comments and what you've said. So by all means, guys, if there's something you want me to talk about, something you want me to mention, please obviously make a drop a comment down below and let me know. So I want to give a big thank you to the current subscribers, all subscribers, new subscribers, and this will save you some time and some money. Please do not forget to give a like and a thumbs up. So ultimately, guys, just a bit more of a diary even for myself, not necessarily just about the fragrances, but at the same time, a little thing I've learned probably on the fragrance journey so far. So we're nearly at 2,000 subscribers. I know this isn't the biggest channel, guys, but do me a big solid and give this a thumbs up, and also subscribe to the channel if you've seen this for the first time, and help obviously the algorithm grow and help us to reach more people. Because I'm giving you ultimately, guys, my perspective on fragrances from someone who personally buys their own fragrances. YouTube AdSense doesn't really give me, to be honest, that much money that I could really say I'm paid from YouTube at this point. So at the end of the day, guys, I'm giving my honest opinion when it comes to fragrances. So four things I wish I knew when I started obviously finding out about fragrances. Four things I knew about fragrances. And number one is don't waste your money, guys. I see so many reviews now out there, and again, I've not necessarily even been doing this for a long time. There's so many big reviews out there, as you already know, so I don't necessarily even need to name them. But obviously, these guys have been doing it for some time, and obviously, over time, they've built up that community and that following. So there's more than enough people, guys. So before you go to buy a fragrance, by all means, go and check out one of these other YouTubers. Not necessarily myself. There's loads of other YouTubers out there. Go and check them out, see what their thoughts are, see what they have to say about the fragrance. Is it something they feel is a good fragrance or not? You've got to decide on that. Excuse me, hay fever time. Something you got to decide on that, guys. But ultimately, one thing I noticed as well, what can happen with these fragrances after a while, you can start to get into this sort of, how could I say, process of constantly buying the next fragrance, constantly looking for the next fragrance. Sometimes you'll think to yourself, oh, this fragrance is okay, but it's just not necessarily the best one. Maybe I'll go and buy another one. And that's maybe the trap with some of these Zara fragrances, because it's slightly cheaper, you go and spend more on them. And then obviously the problem with that is that, again, you're not quite satisfied. You're not spent maybe, I don't know, 50, 60 pounds on, say, for instance, this one from Jean-Paul Gaultier, and you decide to buy something which is maybe like an inspired version or a clone, and you're still not happy. You're still not getting what you want. So you think, you know what, I'm going to go and buy another fragrance. Sometimes, guys, I would say in all honesty, and one thing I've learned obviously over the time with doing these fragrance reviews, sometimes it's better just to wait, save up your cash and buy the actual fragrance that you want to buy. Yes, these clones are fine to a point, but if you're feeling unsatisfied or you spray it in the store, you're happy with it, you take it home and then you're not happy, you're still left wanted, guys. So I would say that by all means. I think at some point, if you're really into fragrances, make sure you buy either a niche type of fragrance just to understand the difference in quality, just to understand the difference in the level of longevity that you can get from actual quality fragrance, just to understand the difference in the sillage that you get from a particular fragrance, rather than just buying these, cheaper versions or these clones and saying you don't want to spend all the money on the more expensive one, but at the same time, you're still spending over time, in my opinion, probably more money buying these cheaper fragrances. So that's another sort of thing to bear in mind. So no one actually told me that. That's just something that I've learned to develop over time, and I'll still invest and still buy designer fragrances when it's appropriate to do so. I don't mind buying some of these cheaper versions, but at the same time, I'm also happy to go and buy the designer ones when the time comes. So that's number one. Number two, something I wish I knew when I started off finding about fragrances, your nose will develop. So what I mean by that is sometimes when you're in the beginning stages of maybe learning to do different types of skills, whatever it may be, if you imagine that we have a block of ice and it's literally a solid block, and little by little we're chipping away and start to understand more about the complexity of what we're trying to make or understand, or whatever it may be in that particular skill. Equally with the fragrances, you start to understand more about sillage, understand more about longevity, projection, all these different components that go into fragrances, all these different notes that go into it in respect of the molecules side of things as well. So you start to understand more about these different aspects that go into fragrances, guys. So do not be fooled. Do not think that you necessarily have to know it all. No one's saying that you have to know it all. Sometimes when you start off, there are many fragrances I smelt in the beginning. Say for instance, La Nuit de l'Homme, very cardamom based sort of fragrance. In the beginning, I didn't particularly like that fragrance. In the beginning, my perspective was just like, wow, this is quite a bit of an old man scent. This is quite sort of in your face. Even Creed Aventus, when I first smelled that, I didn't particularly like that fragrance. It was, in my opinion, at the time when I smelled it for the very first time, I was probably a teenager. You know, it was probably more of an older man sort of smell to me, and it just didn't mean anything to me at that particular stage. As life develops, as things develop along the way, guys, you'll start to find what works and what doesn't work for you. Again, skin chemistry as well, and you'll start to be able to pick up some of the notes. Now, again, by no means am I someone who can actually know all of the note breakdowns necessarily with any fragrance, and I prefer to check and make sure I'm getting something correctly rather than just making things up. But at the same time, you know, people do their research, people look into fragrances in different ways, and it's good if you can get to that level of detail and complexity. For some guys, it's a hobby, and for some guys, it's more of a passion. So ultimately, you know, you got to find your own way. But one thing I will say is that the more you become accustomed with fragrances, your nose will develop, and the fragrance that you thought you didn't like maybe, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, you can smell it again now and actually understand to some extent what's coming from that fragrance. So to some extent, guys, you know, people talk about batch codes and everything else like going on with fragrances and when it was made, and you know, maybe it was owned by a different company at the time and it was sold to a different company. You know, all these things can have an impact on the fragrance, and to some extent, I start to understand that now as well. To some extent, depending on when this was made, just say this was made in 2017, for example, particularly this particular bottle. This is, to some extent, art in a bottle. This is a conversation. This is trying to say something. This is trying to tell me that at this particular moment in time, you know, the perfumer decided to make this, and this is what the perfumer was trying to express. And obviously, me wearing this fragrance, what am I trying to express? What am I trying to say? So there's so much that goes into it, guys, in respect of how you dress, how you come off, and equally, that fragrance that you wear, again, it's just the icing on the cake. You know, so if you're going across somebody else like that, they could ask you, well, what's in that fragrance? Why that fragrance is so nice? And because obviously your nose is developed now to a certain point, you can highlight, well, there should be notes of maybe some pear in this one, which is a key note. There could be something in respect of maybe some sort of like leather note in the base. Again, this is obviously slightly more fruity. And obviously getting into that level of detail, that level of discussion, guys. So, you know, your nose will develop over time. Don't feel like if you smell a fragrance now, you think to yourself, oh my God, I don't like the fragrance, to hell with that fragrance. You may think that now, you may smell it later on in the future and say to yourself, actually, that isn't a bad fragrance. Because again, you've just understood maybe slightly more about it, the composition of the fragrance. And again, our tastes are very subjective. Our tastes do develop over time. So I think if you can smell and pick up on some of these notes, ultimately, you know, you can use that obviously to decipher what you're like moving forward in respect to what you want to buy. But that shouldn't necessarily mean that if there's a fragrance you don't necessarily like, you shouldn't also try and give it an opportunity to at least understand what's in the fragrance. So your nose will develop, guys. That's something I have learned as well. Moving on to number three. Let me have a quick look at my notes on number three. Okay, so number three, ultimately, guys, the more you spend does not necessarily mean that it's necessarily going to be a good quality fragrance. It doesn't necessarily mean that the more you spend is going to definitely guarantee that you're going to get compliments. It's not necessarily about that. You could be in certain environments where, I don't know, someone who spent $200 or £200 on a fragrance, to say Perfume de Mali, for example, on a fragrance, that particular house may not necessarily work well on their skin, or it may not necessarily be a suitable environment for you know, that particular high niche brand type of fragrance to be worn. It may not be appropriate. You know, if you're maybe in school or in high school or whatever it may be like that, and you're smelling these fragrances, to be honest, I don't really think it's necessary to be spending, you know, a lot of money on a fragrance. You know, anything over £100 in my fragrance, in my opinion, on a fragrance, you've got to decide for yourself. But I think that might be a little bit too much. You know, depending on the circumstances and depending on, you know, where you are in your life. It's not appropriate if you're going to high school and you're wearing, now when I say not appropriate, it's entirely your decision, but if you're wearing, I don't know, Yves Saint Laurent and all these different things like that, that's fine if you're wearing maybe Y or something like that. But do you really want to go and spend, you know, something £150 or so on Tom Ford's type of fragrance? Do you really need that for high school on a daily basis? Maybe not. Special occasions, fair enough, but I think you've also got to just develop, you know, your nose, understand what works for you. But again, it doesn't necessarily mean that because you've worn, you've taken the time to wear a fragrance that costs £200-300, whatever it may be, that people are going to even care. People don't really care. They'll be like, okay, this person smells nice. That is it sometimes. So I wouldn't really worry too much, guys, about going out of your way to spend crazy monies on fragrances. Some designer fragrances, in my opinion, will do more than enough if you're looking for compliments. But at the same time, obviously with designer fragrances, the issue will be more so that you're probably going to find more people are wearing it, i.e. Dior Sauvage, for example, compared to something which is slightly more niche, so to speak. So you got to be, you got to have the special occasions for you. You got to work out what works for you. But there's a time for everything, guys. And I don't think necessarily spending more money on a fragrance will definitely guarantee that you're going to get more compliments. That's just one thing I'm going to say. So don't be fooled and don't be upset if you spend, I don't know, £200-300 or something, and then someone's wearing, again, this £20 bottle from Zara for Vibrant Leather, and then all of a sudden that person's getting more compliments than you. So don't necessarily fall into that trap. I think that's one of the biggest things when we see things that may be slightly unobtainable to us, or we're concerned about the cost and think, wow, that's so expensive. And you think to yourself, actually, I'm going to have to go and spend that. I'm going to feel like $1 million or whatever it may be. Okay, that's how you feel. Not everybody else even cares. So just bear that in mind. So that was number 3. On to number 4. Number 4, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this very, very much very once. And I've noticed as well, there's been a bit of a move away from this particular terminology that's been used. So again, guys, if you know what I'm talking about, just let me know down below in the comments. There's no such thing as a panty dropper. Panty droppers don't exist. I've even said that to some ladies, like saying, do you think this is a panty dropper? Do you think this one will do it? You can say that. I mean, I'm sure you could say that as a bit of a joke or whatever it may be. But to be putting that out there on YouTube now, have a look, guys. You have a look. You could see it saying like, this is for pool parties. This is like the party guy. This is Las Vegas. You can see all that stuff. How many people actually putting out videos now saying that this is a panty dropper in this current day and age? This current day and age of Me Too and everything else like that. How many people are putting it out there? So just have a look on that, guys. In my opinion, there's no such thing as a panty dropper fragrance. You can't wear this fragrance and say, panties are going to drop because I'm wearing this fragrance. It doesn't happen that way. It's never happened that way. Yes, it may help and assist. It may be a bit of game you've got me going on. You could be quite a stylish person. Everything else is right. And this just helps to sort of seal the deal a little bit, because someone think, like that fragrance, or wow, signature scent, I'm going to remember that guy or remember that girl even. But I don't believe necessarily within itself, guys, a fragrance can drop those panties. It's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. Don't go and buy a fragrance because you believe that to be the case. I know so many people have said, even I'm just using this as an example, so it's not particularly this fragrance, but I know so many people saying that this is a club banging fragrance. This is one for the clubs. The ladies love it. And I've come across ladies that say that they don't particularly like it, and I've come across ladies that say they do like it. So, just because you're wearing this fragrance does not guarantee the panties, guys. So don't be fooled. Don't go run out and waste your money on something because somebody says this is a panty dropper. It doesn't work that way. So yes, try out the fragrance. Go and buy the bottle if you're really happy with it, if you enjoy the fragrance. It does help, maybe. It can be slightly more of a seductive fragrance that may lend itself slightly more to that particular genre of things. But in itself, there's no such thing as a panty dropper. Don't be fooled. Don't go run out wasting your money. When I seen these videos initially and I was, introduced to a lot of fragrances, I was thinking, wow, this is like, this is like a new power that you could have. And, again, so mysterious because I didn't know that much about the fragrances at the time. But as you start to develop your nose, there are loads of fragrances out there that can do the same job ultimately. There's loads of seductive fragrances. There's loads of fragrances that's going to be slightly more, work maybe more on your skin. Some people are using fragrances that technically, they can't necessarily smell it themselves anymore. That's what happens sometimes with fragrances. You get to the point that you become nose blind to the fragrance, but at the same time, everyone else can smell it around you. That could be the panty dropper fragrance. So no particular one fragrance is a panty dropper. You just got to be realistic, guys. There can be some fragrances that ladies particularly enjoy slightly more. 1 Million, in my opinion, is one of those fragrances that even now is so played out. So many women still like it. There's hardly, I personally not come across any lady that says they do not like the smell of 1 Million. So, it's one of those fragrances where, no one seems to mention that fragrance particularly anymore because they're saying from a guy's perspective, everyone's got it on and it's too played out. What's the difference between that as a panty dropper and this as a panty dropper? So ultimately, guys, there's no such thing. Don't waste your money and your time to go and buy a new fragrance because you think that this is a panty dropper and this is going to get the panties. It doesn't work that way, guys. I want to say thank you very much, guys. If this has saved you some time and some money, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Next video, guys, we'll have something in respect of what ladies like guys to wear on a date. So I've got some new videos on that. So we'll see what's going on with those ladies, and I will put it up on the next video. Ciao.